Okay, so this is a quick run through of the Tahoe, Lake Tahoe data set. This was a bathymetric data set that came in with supposedly a very high resolution. And the challenge was that the conventional gridding and visualization utilities that were made available to or through hydrographic software were not producing the image that justified the resolution of the data that was known to be in it. So there were certain areas in this polygon here where the acquisition had significant overlap of points as well as oversampling of the sonar, and that wasn't coming through. So just to give you a quick idea, here's the point density of the data set. So what we're looking at here are warm colors are very high densities of data points, and the data points were produced by the overlapping swaths of the multi-beam sonar. So on the color scale here, we have 0 to 1 meter, so red to blue across the rainbow spectrum. And then we're making things transparent as they become more sparse. So that's what the 10 is on the bottom here. And that's why you can see they kind of become a little bit transparent on the outer edge. So basically, this is a feature-rich area. There's a lot of vertical relief in the features, very steep slopes. And so we want to leverage that to pick up some of the extra data. So before we dive too deeply into that, you'll see that most of the area is covered in blue, and that's the 1 meter target. And as I was saying before, the hydrographic resources, the gridding software, were producing a 1 meter grid, nominal grid as an output. And if you tried to go to half a meter, things didn't get much better. So there were limitations there. So I wanted to create a workflow that would leverage the point density. So the goal would be to create something like an adaptive resolution grid. So I've done a couple of standalone grids here. So if the first thing we do is we just, without any interpolation or extrapolation allowed, just lay a 20 centimeter mesh over these data points. And where we can produce a reasonable grid for that 20 centimeter cell, we will. And where we can't, we'll just leave it as null. So if we first do that, you can see that those warm areas, so I'll toggle that on and off just so you can follow with me. Those warmer colored areas are capable of producing a 20 centimeter grid. If we did that for the half meter or the 50 centimeter, it goes out a little bit further. But if we do the 1 meter as expected, we get the entire data set. So let's study that just a little bit deeper, first of all. So if we want to get the 20 centimeter grid out into this 1 meter territory, we're either going to have to oversample or regrid the 1 meter grid to 20 so we can integrate those two layers at the same resolution. Here, it's just the resolution of the data. But up on the shallows and on the western side where it's all shallow, and on the flats of those features, we are able to get the 20 centimeter. So regardless of that, there is another level of detail that we can pull in just by looking at the data. So we might be able to do better than these standalone layered grids. So if we take a look, I'm going to create a hill shade of the point density. So the same file that's colored here. And just a little more detail on this too. How this was calculated was for the entire data set, which was a point cloud. For any given point, I found the 50 nearest neighbors and then computed their average distance to that point. So we did that for every point in the data set, and we get a nominal nearest neighbor distance as a metric. And that's what we've color coded here. So the nominal nearest neighbor distance in this area here is less than 10 centimeters. In some cases, there are even 10,000 samples per meter, which means you can even get into the millimeters for resolution on some of that. That doesn't hold true out in the outer regions of the data set. So if we hill shade that, this is going to give us a little more understanding of what's going on. So now I'm going to zoom in. And now you can see it looks like a bunch of sticks kind of thrown out there. These are the multi-beam swaths. So that's where you have actual data. And you can see as the sonar reorients on the map, you'll get these overlaps. So the swath is always perpendicular to the direction of travel. So that's why it looks like they're mowing the lawn on this reddish area, because they did. They went back and forth, overlapping these, much like you would if you were painting the wall. In some areas, more overlap than others, but for the entire region, a very high resolution of points. And then as the feature starts to slope, uh, they went around it because they were trying to angle and target the sonar to get more of the characteristics of the steeply sloping features as well. So this is a plateau in red, and then the data point density falls off as you go downslope into the depths. But regardless, you can see that as these multi-beams overlap, like you see over here, it has an effect of enhancing the resolution. So locally, there's a spike in the point density here. Something else we see is you can see some patterns, some textural patterns right in here. What's happening here is because these are steep slopes, you're getting some acoustic echoing or reverberation or scattering. So this is a very high frequency data set. So it's still coming in at about the same travel time, which converts to depth. So we're getting about the same depth of the features, but that's really a source of noise. So that additive effect of having the multi-beam swaths overlapping across different travel paths or trackline paths, as well as having that noise from the steep slopes scattering back, it's giving us something to reach for, because we have local patches of high density data points, even though they're colored blue for most of that, because this is also gridded. If you looked at that as a point cloud, you'll see these are patches of warm colors locally where these things are intersecting. So there's another one there. So if we look at those noise patterns, we see they're not localized. They actually exist everywhere throughout the data set, wherever there's a steep slope. So if I turn on a representative grid, turn that off, then you can see those features do line up where there are steeply sloping features. So the next step that we did, I'm just going to go ahead and open this up here, is we created a Poisson surface. We did a surface reconstruction for this data set. So we basically took all of the areas where there were high density points, whether that was a widespread area, such as in these plateau regions, or if it was localized, such as we were just seeing out in the outer regions. Then we're going to use those to reconstruct a surface using a Poisson surface reconstruction. And so what that aims to do is to create a watertight surface, so no discontinuities across the data points. And what's nice about the Poisson surface reconstruction is you can specify a parameter, which is referred to as the depth parameter. And what that is that's the depth of an octtree. So you can sort of gauge, what depth of octtree or what oct depth is going to produce a point spacing that matches the nominal resolution, whether that's a meter or 20 centimeters. So that's where we get our variable grid strategy from, is we can vary the octal depth. So what we've done is we've actually done a point reconstruction with an oct depth of about 14 for the entire data set. And that gives us between 20 centimeters and 50 centimeters of point spacing on our reconstructed surface. And then what we do is we throw our original data points back at it and we grid it. So we can see, if we zoom in, that we have really good detail. This was our area of high point density on this slope. This had, as we said before, millimeter potential for a grid resolution. This is at 20 centimeters. And then as we go out, we're able to still get 20 centimeters because of those local points, but you can see it also gets a little noisy because of the multi-beam swath pattern. So these are really minor errors of about 1 to 2 centimeters error in that vertical. And that comes out through the hill shade because we've sort of added some contrast in hill shading that error. So it looks like it's a little bit noisier than it actually is. But what's really nice is if we start flying through this thing, the overall result was far superior than the 1 meter resolution that we were getting from the hydrographic packages. So we're able to use beneficial noise sources. So we have the additive effect of having multiple overlapping multi-beam swaths and the steep slopes, creating a scattering effect, giving us an extra point density locally in certain areas in the deeper regions. So we've used all of those factors together to create this fly through here. And so now we can just kind of scan around a little bit and see what kind of features we do see. And we've been told that this approach has revealed, you can see that over here as well, the actual geomorphology. So this is a fault zone here at this steep sloping here. This provides more detail as to whether these are glacial or just sedimentary or maybe even tsunami related deposits. But with this level, you can actually see how the slopes are changing their morphology. So you can see whether these are sedimentary or slope failures, as well as some of these, they do appear to be glacial deposits fallen out during the melting of ice, for example. And so we'll scan through a little bit more. It's a bit of a slow fly through. We can go up the canyons. We can go back down the same canyon. I really want to go to this next one because we're all familiar with this style road cut. If you're driving through the southwest, Arizona, Oklahoma, New Mexico, parts of California and Nevada, you'll see these types of sedimentary features. These are lots of layers laying out, and they break away and they fall. Sometimes they're referred to as elephant's knees because they kind of look like the knees of an elephant. As the sediment breaks away, you get these little embayments left over, and then they have these extra deposits that fall down. So that was a huge step forward. So we're able to get a roughly 20 centimeter grid resolution off of this. In some areas, we know we can do better, but we'll have to locally address those. And we can leverage some of the noise to get the added resolution where a conventional workflow might say that there isn't any data or there isn't nominal point spacing to do that. But you can clearly see there's enough here to at least qualitatively assess the area and the geology here. And this still works for this still works for quantitative analysis too. You just wouldn't use this particular image. You'd go back to the earlier step where you could leverage either the Poisson surface by itself or with the data, and you can create a mesh from that. So if you wanted to query this surface, you could do it at different levels. So you could query the point cloud and get an actual data point or a nearest data point, or you could query the reconstructed surface and get a approximated data point, or you can query the combined gridded surface, and you'll get something that's very, very accurate and precise. It might be within an inch or two of the original data point, though. And so that's it. That's how you can combine a visualization process from one industry with that of another. So we're able to bring new justification to the point density. This data set was collected with a high resolution for the intentional purpose of visualization, and it wasn't able to really justify that in conventional visualization using hydrographic workflows. But by bringing in the Poisson surface reconstruction, which is something you would find in aerial imagery processing and LiDAR processing, but also in gaming and in simulation and just in visualization in general. So combining those two workflows was really powerful because now it brings us an entire order of magnitude, and in some cases, 2 orders of magnitude more resolution on the final surface that we've reconstructed. So you can clearly see, where there's been some slope failures here. This entire package of sediment has detached and slidden down. That's happened in a couple of areas. You can see that this package of sediments overlays some sedimentary rock, and that's had a collapse in some cases as well. And you can see the layers, the varves, the lake sediments that have been laid down seasonally over geologic time. And you can even see the boulders on the order of centimeters to meters in scale. And then you can see some of the larger ones out there that are on the scale of meters. And you can see that everything's falling down into the depths. So you can start to make assessments now as to what the geomorphological past is here, just from this. So thank you for watching. Appreciate it.